Welcome, everyone, to the Royish Good Looks podcast. I think season 2, episode 3. Today, we've got a very special episode accompanied by a very special guest. Today, we have with us the host of the Krypton to Alderaan podcast and my BFF, Joey K, your Star Wars lover. Joey, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, no, thank you. It is really great to be on this side of the microphone, Royce. Usually, I'm the one teeing up the show, and you're the one saying, hello, Royce, hello, podcast, and now I get to be the one to do that.
Well, I hope I can do the job justice. I'm glad you're here. So, Joey and I, for years, we've been talking about Star Wars on the Krypton to Alderaan podcast. Check it out if you're into that. I think you probably are if you're on the channel already. But we have talked forever about, hey, we should do an episode talking about music, the other thing that both of us are very passionate about. And a quick aside here, there might not even be a Royish Good Looks if it wasn't for Joey, because when we met, you introduced me to the video game Portal, which, as I recall, this is when Joey and I met as college roommates. I was like, this is the nerdiest thing I have ever seen. You had that big Alienware computer tower with all like the lights on it, but you're playing Portal, a game, and I was like, this is a pretty wild game. And then the end credits scene with the GLaDOS theme song that plays at the end. Having not met you and not having you be into that game and introducing me to that stupid end credits theme in Jonathan Coulton, who I've often said is one of my main influences for kind of what I do is the nerdy music genre, there might not be a Royish Good Looks. So, Joey, thank you for that. A round of applause.
Wow, I didn't know. No royalty. I've seen no royalties from that in the history of your success, but am proud to be that. That must have been in like 2009. So was Coulton even a thing? That he was obviously enough of a thing to get the Portal song, and he obviously like did a lot of stage and live shows, but he certainly, I don't think, was then the personality that he is now, and on whatever that NPR show is, and doing the Joko cruise and making other albums. I don't think he was a big name back then.
No, I wouldn't have come across him because at that time I was listening to like pop punk and emo, and I think I was into some nerdy music because around that time, 2008, 2009, was the like auto-tune the news era of things. So that maybe tangentially kind of relates, but I don't know how I would have found Jonathan Coulton otherwise. But I do know he had a lot of fan-made videos on YouTube from his songs, because all his songs are, what is it called? The Creative Commons. So you can take his music, make a music video out of it, and it's, you know, you don't owe him royalties for it. As long as you're not making money, you can make your own fan edits from it. So aside from the Portal theme song, we must have read his name in the credits and then said, okay, let's look this guy up. Oh, he's got other songs. Maybe it was the YouTube videos. Do you remember having any of his other music aside from just knowing it from the game? You didn't have like an album or anything.
No, I did not have any of his music. That was probably my like 10th time playing through Portal, because I would do like speed runs to see if I could beat it in less than 2 hours or whatever, and listen to the song. And that song was a hit.
So here's my guess, is that we saw his name in the end credits. We looked him up because I don't really remember celebrating the Portal song so much as this song here, The Future Soon. In my solar dome on a platform in space, 'cause it's gonna be the future soon. I won't always be this way. When the things that make me weak and strange get engineered.
Yeah, I love this song. This song also just hit in a way because I'm a nerd. I've always been a nerd. There was a point in time where being a nerd wasn't cool, and this is like, it's a very parody song, but it hits on that life of being like, oh, I'm a nerd, I'm going to build a platform and a spacecraft in space or whatever, because this girl rejected me because I'm a nerd. I'm going to build an army of robots to like take over Earth or whatever. It was very much like Revenge of the Nerd kind of storyline, which really hit, I think.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, I think we're going to jump around a lot of topics once we eventually get deeper into this conversation and away from Jonathan Coulton. Yeah. But it's so interesting that like you can relate to, I don't like the term parody. I've said this like before. I think it's a little bit of a disparaging kind of connotation to me. I don't want to call Jonathan Coulton a parody artist. This is an original. But like you said, that nerddom theme to it, you relating to it. But the story is fantastical and goofy, but there's still some kind of like earnestness to that. a hero in that story that you kind of identify still with. Man, this is the soundtrack to that 2008, 2009 era. And a lot of the music I remember you playing still felt kind of similar to this. So it's really interesting that you're like, I didn't go to a Jonathan Coulton show. He didn't open for my favorite band. I didn't have an album, but I did find him and his music resonated with me. But you played other music like the girl with the green jacket. And,
oh, yeah.
Or like, who's the band that does Matt and Kim with their song Daylight, which I feel kind of still fit in that sort of like vein here with Jonathan Coulton. Is there something to that with you of like your taste in music? Did Jonathan Coulton fit in with that just naturally?
I think so. Who sung Girl in the Green Jacket?
Bigwig? Is that really Bigwig?
Yep, that's the one. Yeah. Girl in the Green Jacket. I'm also a jacket guy. I love jackets. Like I have a lot of jackets. I love jackets. So it's like it hits for me on many levels. But I think like the connection there with those things is that Jonathan Coulton is obviously very like fun and funny, but there's an energy to it. And I think that was always what I needed from music. I always needed to be able to turn to it to get energy. I still need it to this day. Like this morning, I was like, I need a boost of energy, so I need to listen to this one particular song. But certainly that was the way it was with like Bigwig and other music I was listening to then. And as well as like Matt and Kim when Daylight came out. I think Daylight, the reason it hit my radar was because it was like in a Tanqueray commercial or something like that.
So that was another like one-off song that you knew, not the whole band?
Right. But then probably because of you, I like dove deep into it. I was like, I really like this song. I need to know more. And I think even to this day, so that was probably in like 2008, 2009, right? Again, when we first started college. But even to this day, Matt and Kim is like my top tier. I consider them my band. This is my music. I will follow them on every social media. I'll listen to everything they make. I'll listen to every like remix of their songs that someone puts out. I really love Matt and Kim, and it's just the energy. And if you see them live, it's the energy that they bring to it. And they like also really enjoy each other, which is fun to watch. There's the wholesomeness there too. I don't know. It's just really, I just love that music, but it has to have that like energy for me.
Yeah. I love that Bigwig track. Like that's the punk rock vibe that I like. And I feel like the subject matter though hooked you maybe more than like the sonic landscape of it. And I love that we can like merge those kind of two worlds. But even cooler with Matt and Kim and Jonathan Coulton, that like one song, was the spark that lit the fire that you're then, I'm going to consume the whole catalog and get into the band. Yeah, I want to play that Matt and Kim track real quick.
Before you hit play, I want to put it in the audience's ear that the reason that this song sticks out to me is because when I was first playing it, I was like, I really like this band. Royce, you got to listen to this song. You would sing Joey's music to the tune of the song. So you'd be like, Joey's music, Joey's music. So as we're listening to it, I want the audience to think of that. You automatically associated it with my music even back then.
Like over this part?
Yeah, Joey's music, Joey's music. Yeah. And it's just Matt on a synthesizer or a keyboard or something, and Kim on drums. And it's just the two of them, basically.
When I hear this, dude, it's so fun. That energy, like you're saying, the energy is there.
Yep. That's what I love about it. I think there's other connections to make to the music that I default to that has a very weird kind of seed planted that translates better back to Jonathan Coulton, because Jonathan Coulton early music is super weird. Eat Your Brains, Future Soon, all the music from that era is just super weird and sci-fi and nerdy. And I think a lot of my musical taste is that in general. Whereas Matt and Kim is more of the energy, I need to get amped up side of things. What gets me out of bed.
Yeah. Dude, and Matt and Kim, I love when the drums kick in there. I'm like, yeah, this is a party. Like they clearly write music for it to be fun and, get everybody up off their feet. We saw them together, did we not, a few years ago?
We did. It was awesome. It was a great show.
One of the best shows I've ever seen for a band that only has two members. You would think, you need the external singer working the crowd or like the lead guitarist, standing up on the monitors on stage. Just two people, one drummer and one synthesized keyboard guy. That's enough to have a really fun time.
but they're also full of energy. They're also working the crowd. Like Kim gets up on the drums, right? And she's like interacting with the crowd. They're very high energy. I saw them twice that summer, same tour. So worth it seeing them multiple. It was just so fun. They're so energetic. I obviously love their music. Man, that was a great summer because we also saw The Darkness that summer as well.
And that was another really good show.
Yes, good show. Super weird band, super weird vibe, super weird gimmick. I really dig that.
You know, I'm a really big fan of spectacle and gimmick in general, but that is a really fine line to walk with your music. There's a Jonathan Coulton quote where he's like, I'm trying to authentically rock. And how do you do that? Especially when your songs are about giant squids that eat, ships on the ocean sort of thing. Like,
well, the Beatles did it.
You're right. The Beatles, I mean, who could do it better than them, obviously. But it could feel disingenuous. So it takes a special delivery to sell that. But you have to have the fun in there somehow. I'm an emo kid at heart, but the other side of the spectrum is that kind of happy-go-lucky side. And that could be maybe too candy pop and goofy. But I think all these tracks we pulled up so far do a great job with that. It's interesting. You're like, yeah, I love all this. But like, these all feel like kind of little bubbles. Like I found this song and then this band. Like even before all these tracks, what was your musical taste before that college era? How would you define that? What were you into before then?
I guess pre-college, Dashboard Confessional was that was a big thing for me. I just liked a lot of his music. I remember I bought my first Cake album on CD. Fashion Nugget by Cake is the first CD I ever bought myself. And then I played it for a friend in my car, and he was like, this is really weird, man. And he just like wouldn't listen to it. So I had a lot of this like idea that maybe my musical taste didn't relate to other people's musical taste. But I really liked that weird stuff. Cake, the sound was super weird, very unconventional, but also the lyrics were bizarre. Yeah, like kazoos and little like noisemakers and all kinds of sounds in their music. Back then, Cake and the Gorlliaz were my two main sources for like my own personal music taste, and both obviously very strange. The Gorlliaz was a whole other realm of music, lore. There's such like a rich lore to the fake world that the Gorlliaz live in, which I also just like. That's the Star Wars nerd in me. I love the lore. I love the context. I love like the deep story. So yeah, that was all my kind of jam back then.
This is like a huge spectrum though. And I also love this because that I think all styles of music and genres like have a time and a place. You can appreciate a little bit of everything. My least favorite like party conversation is what kind of music are you into? Joey knows this because this is a running gag in my world. But yeah, when somebody says, oh, I love everything except for rap and country, it's like, yeah, but those are cool. Like they fit for a certain time, a certain day, a certain place. And also to just completely discount an entire genre, man, I think it's such a disservice. But even with what you just described, from Gorlliaz to Cake to Dashboard, like that's a pretty wide spectrum. So it's almost like you're saying you had a hard time with people like appreciating your taste in music, but it seems like you just had a wider tolerance for it than maybe the people that were around you. Like you're not an emo kid. I don't know what type of, because Cake is a lot older than Gorlliaz and Dashboard. That Fashion Nugget is 1996. Older album, like older sound, obviously. But I also have vivid memories of this as well, sitting in the car with my oldest brother, Rob.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all
That's got to trigger memories for somebody in the audience there.
Yeah. And still pull them up to this day. I recently bought vinyl of Fashion Nugget, and I was like, dope, this is the first CD I ever bought. Now I'm buying it on vinyl. So yeah, still big Cake fans to this day, and got to see them. I don't know if it was the same summer as Matt and Kim and The Darkness, but got to see them live a few years ago, which was also really just a really fun show.
When they gave away a tree? What was up with that? That's the only time I've ever seen that at a concert.
Very strange. They were like, if anyone can tell us what tree this is.
Everybody be very quiet in the crowd. We're giving away a tree. Do you remember what tree it was?
I think it was a dogwood tree. Is this good content?
This is great. This is great content.
Yeah. I guess a broad broad range. But like in high school being 2002 to 2005, that was an era of like the Dashboard Confessional. I think the Sum 41, Panic at the Disco came in there. Fall Out Boy came in there at some point too. And so, yeah, so I never really got into like the emo, quote unquote, emo stuff. So, but I was really into Gorlliaz, which I think Clint Eastwood was their first single, and it just like hooked me.
I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless.
You talk about the range. I also had System of the Down. I was also listening to System of the Down as well in that time frame. Which
None of those really fit together.
Way out in left field. No, the pieces of the puzzle were all strewn apart. So yeah, I don't know. Some form of like weird funk, punk rock, anti-establishment.
It's all like under the guise of like alternative rock. You'd hear all of those maybe on the same radio station, but they all definitely are unique and like like we said earlier, unconventional. They have some sort of factor to them, and I guess this makes every artist great, is that you can say this is how they're different from other artists. It seems like you appreciate that individuality rather than like you listen to just regular pop top 40, and sometimes the artists are, maybe more interchangeable than there's not a lot of System of a Downs, that's one kind of specific thing. Same thing with Cake. And I can see how that can be hard in the high school era to like connect with people on that if you have those sort of left of center tastes. Do you find yourself like trying to get other people into your music, or was it just kind of for you? Was it a communal thing at all?
Like I said, I played like Cake for a friend and he was like, that's weird. And I was like, oh, I don't want people to think I'm weird. So I didn't do that anymore. And I became like much more of a follower than like a leader in that space. So just started listening to what other people were listening to.
Dude, there's so much of that. Like, oh, you don't listen to this band, you're not cool. See, I remember everybody I knew was into like 50 Cent in high school. And I'm like, this is not for me. But that was, a lot of people were into that. But I kind of felt that where I was like trying to listen to something everybody else wasn't listening to. I took it too seriously.
Right.
Like, if you didn't know who the band was, like I felt more compelled to be like, cool, this is mine. It's just for me. Which I don't, as a grown, somewhat more grown person, I don't even want to say adult, but having grown up, like I don't like taking that idea anymore. Like music should and can be for everyone, just like we talk about that with Star Wars as well. Like, is the Clone Wars just a kid's show? Like, no. Grown adults can also weep while they're watching that series as well. It's either for you or it's not. It doesn't matter your age necessarily. But there was so much like gatekeeping, I feel like, in that era, and the type of music you are defining the kind of person you are, or like you said, the friends around you, if you even get along with them. I definitely didn't pretend to like other people's musical interests. Like, I just liked punk music. If you were into 50 Cent, there was nothing in common there. I couldn't get into it. And it's interesting that you're linking up on sometimes the funny lyrical content and maybe like the wacky arrangements in like a Cake with the vibra slap and, the horns and everything just being kind of a wild arrangement. Like for me, I needed to hear guitars, bass, and drums like a band. That's how my musical brain developed. And if you listen to a lot of like hip hop or rap, it's a way different arrangement style where it's maybe more focused on like the lyrical content. And I never listened to that. Like that's been a theme on the show here in the past of like, I'm listening for the melodies, the chords, the way the music like literally is music, at least to me. I'm not thinking about the lyrics. It obviously connects with people in different ways. My musical taste was like, if it suited that emo vibe, the Dashboards, the Fall Out Boys, Newfound Glory, Yellowcard, those were like, I guess those are all a little bit interchangeable to some degree. Yellowcard's got the violin. Nobody else had a violin.
Yeah. Yeah. No one else had the violin. Go Yellowcard. I like that point because I think it's a lot of like, I was tuning into these things. I like the lyrics that like made me smile or made me laugh or were kind of sarcastic or whatever, which is why I like Jonathan Coulton and why I like Cake. But it's also the instrumentals. So there's like, there's different sort of pieces of music that come together to form the song. And so it's interesting that you were more focused on the set pieces, whereas some people would be more focused on like the singer or the lyrics or the tone of the singer and those kinds of things, which I definitely get. It's why, like you said, music should be for everyone and there shouldn't be gatekeeping and we can all just like it, which goes back further to why it's kind of silly to say I like everything except country or rap.
Well, and now, I have to check myself because I can't make that statement and now, hold an opinion against a genre. But now when I listen to those types of tracks, like if that comes up on shuffle at a party or on the radio station or whatever, just kind of randomly or shopping in the mall, I have to like listen to it with different ears, like put that different hat on to appreciate it for what it is sort of thing. I do find myself appreciating lyrics a lot more nowadays than I used to, because sometimes maybe you're hearing the same, I've heard this musical element before, but maybe I haven't heard this lyrical element before, and you kind of evaluate the piece totally differently. But coming from having taken piano lessons and trombone lessons and played in bands, if I couldn't hear that musical bed, there was less for me to initially grab onto at that more formative age. I would listen to lyrics, you sing along to lyrics if you know the lyrics, but I never looked deeply into the meaning of them. And of course, there's plenty of metaphor in music. Like it's worth reading the lyric sheet and trying to interpret what they meant if it wasn't just the girl in the green jacket.
Yeah, I think that the reason that some of this stuff really stood out to me was because, again, I really liked the lore behind things. I really liked the storytelling. I really liked the world building, which is why the Gorlliaz really appealed to me. It's why Coheed and Cambria really appealed to me, because the lyrics, pretty unconventional, but also like corresponded to a comic book that the band was writing. So there is this like world within the world that it all connects to. It's kind of like a soundtrack, what a soundtrack becomes or something like that with those bands. And the Gorlliaz still to this day, they're like putting out new albums, and each album has a story that is about the characters who make up the fictional band, the Gorlliaz, and they have this deep, rich lore and the continuation of that. And it really just gets me. I watch the music videos. I follow like what the fictional characters are doing on social media, and they're like part of a cult now, right? And the like bass player is the leader of the cult. There's like huge information there that is also very appealing to me based on like what I like outside of music.
Yeah, this is the Ed Catmull like Creativity Inc. thing. Like if you set up a world that's interesting, like you're good to go. Once people believe in that universe, that's really interesting. If there's anybody out there trying to start a band or any kind of artistry, like, you do sort of need the story behind it, not just simply the song. Man, this was like, you learn that over time, but I wish I understood that as a younger artist. Like with my garage bands in high school, like you just wrote a random song and it like, you made up the chords. You didn't even know like what chords you're playing. You just kind of randomly threw stuff together. It wasn't like brilliantly thought out, but if you can kind of flesh out a story behind it, like what the band stands for, what the album stands for, like you're saying with the Beatles, the sort of like wild concept albums, Jonathan Coulton having these kind of fantastical evil mastermind characters that are like the singer of the song, right? It's not just a songwriter singing about his love interest. It's a mad scientist singing about his love interest. So there's a layer there of intrigue to bring into. Again, that's a lot of like lyrical stuff as well, though. You could strip all that away. I could still love the band if the music just sounded good. Because sometimes Coheed and Cambria, I have no idea. I can't hear the lyrics sometimes. Like it has to be mixed to the point where you can actually discern it, unless, you're reading the lyric sheet along, obviously. But I'll just listen to the great melodies there. Like my dad would always say, like, is that Michael Jackson? I'm like, no, it's Coheed and Cambria. He always thought just because the register, felt kind of similar to Michael Jackson to him.
That's so funny. Do you have a clip you could pull up of like that specific thing that is Michael Jackson-esque about Coheed and Cambria to your dad?
My favorite song off of In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. Have you ever read any of their comic books? Are you actually familiar with like the lore, or just that it exists?
I read the one about the bicycle way back in the day, like one of the first ones, I think. So I'm not super familiar with it, but the idea of it was what was really appealing.
Do you think it's as like, oh, you have to watch the Clone Wars to appreciate the prequels, or, Rebels to appreciate, like, is that the backstory you need that you're missing?
It's a good analogy. I hold the same opinion, whereas each one elevates the other, but I think they can stand on their own.
Coheed and Cambria is filling in the somehow?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is my favorite song off that album. The Camper, Velorium 1, Faint of Heart.
Did somebody take your time?
Well, these are the words that you couldn't say if they could have saved themselves.
You know what? This might not have been the one vocally, but he's just got the higher register, that was maybe peeking that in. When it's like a pristine, it's not, it's not punk rock, I'm mad at my dad. It's not those kind of tonalities that put it in a different genre, When it's really pristine, then you transcend into that kind of pop realm. I think that's what my dad was picking up with.
Yeah.
Unless he's just trolling me. He could have been trolling as well.
Hey, is this Michael Jackson? Yeah, that would be a really funny trolling moment.
What did your parents listen to? Because your dad's a Beatles fan, right?
Yeah, my dad's a huge Beatles fan, and so that's pretty much all we listened to growing up. We'd make our way through their discography or whatever it was called before disc, and then just go back to the beginning. I don't remember listening to much other than the Beatles, except for Elton John. Sometimes we'd put on Elton John. Yeah, he's just a huge Beatles fan. When he plays music, that's the music he plays. He owns horses, and he names the horses after Beatles songs. He's a pretty huge fan. So that's what I grew up with. And because of that, I guess I'm a big Beatles fan. But maybe that's, again, another where maybe the more weird stuff that I like comes in. The stuff that Ringo was in charge of is all pretty weird, but fun, right? Like Octopus's Garden, kind of nonsensical, but very fun and upbeat and a good story. I don't know. It's just fun and weird, which is the way I like my stuff.
Yeah. So your dad's taste definitely influenced your taste. You appreciated what he liked, which I think is I can't imagine having a child and them not being a little bit into some of the music I'm into. So it's cool that you already liked what he liked, or maybe it was just around so you absorbed it. But you're right. Those themes seem to carry over into these other artists.
I do think that, and I wish it worked the other way. I don't know if your parents are like this too, and I assume that you gained a lot of your musical aptitude, your musical history from your family and parents as well. But in my family, it does not work the other way around, where my father has absolutely no appreciation for the music that I like or listen to now, or even as a kid. If I found something new or different that I liked, he just had there was no tolerance for it, which I think his parents also did to him, and probably many others in the transition into rock and roll, when our parents' generation started to listen to rock and roll, but their parents hated it, right? And so that's the way it works now, which I find, unfair. Listen, not only did I have to listen to your music as a kid, but I also appreciated it and developed my own taste around it. But come on,
that's too
let's
bad.
Listen to this whatever song.
Yeah, that's funny because I have stories on both sides of the spectrum. I can very clearly remember being stuck in traffic with my mom, and we had a Taking Back Sunday CD in. And it's bumper to bumper, we're not moving. And she was like, we have to turn this off. It might have been the second time we did the album through, but she couldn't handle the emo whining while we were also stuck in traffic. Maybe could have stood it at another point in time. That's the only time I can ever remember someone in my family being turn this off. We need to listen to something else. But with my dad, all the time trading music back and forth, he embodies what you and I try to do with Star Wars of let's just try to appreciate it as much as we can for what it is. He will listen to whatever album you would put on and try to pick out things that he liked about it. Or he would definitely just keep his mouth shut if he didn't. But there was a lot of times that he would be like, oh, I like that song from that one band, and he'd never know their name, or he would conflate bands with each other. He didn't actually learn the back history or the lore or whatever, or the names of the tracks, but he would recognize different songs. There was a Third Eye Blind album that he really loved the song Blinded. I think it's on Out of the Vein. It's a great track. He loves the guitar in this song.
I never believed that things that happen for a reason, and they never go as planned.
Oh, yeah. It also sounds like Kiss Me.
A little bit, yeah.
Kiss me down by the broken tree house.
This album I listened to every day in high school. I really love. I love Third Eye Blind, period, but I love this album. And that's one specific song that my dad would be like, put on that song. I like that song. I do think it's a special thing to be able to share your passion with the generation above you, rather than be like, turn down that racket.
Yeah. Again, it was maybe a more alienating sense of oh, this is mine. This is like Cake is mine and the Gorlliaz are mine. I mean, the Gorlliaz were much more popular when they came out. Like lots more people liked them, but the weirder stuff like Cake was definitely mine to my own. I also just really liked and still do unironically, unapologetically like musicals and like musical television. And back in that time frame, Buffy the Vampire was big and the Buffy musical episode came out and became like my favorite episode of television. I loved it. I bought the soundtrack. I thought it was so great and fun and weird. And so this is like the thread that's connecting all of these things. But certainly I have a vivid memory of putting it on in the car and my father just being like, no, we're turning this off, which may be fair, but also, come on, give me a break.
Is it just that like nothing can compare to the Beatles? Like music is better in my day? Or is it like, no, this is all I need is this work of art, you know, like I don't need any more. Both?
No, you said all I need, and I said is love. That's
I love it. Yeah.
No, I don't know. It's what they grew up with. It was new. It was hot when they were growing up, and it was the new thing, and their parents hated it, and it was very like anti-adult and anti-establishment, and the Beatles were like the biggest thing, right? Like I don't mean to say that flippantly, but they were like the biggest thing in the world, and so it was like a very important formative thing. Maybe our generation doesn't necessarily have something as strongly cemented as that, but also we have really great music, right? It's not like good music stopped there. We have a lot of really great stuff, and really all music is great to somebody, so it doesn't really matter. It's the beauty of the subjectiveness of all of this where it's like, okay, maybe you don't like the Buffy musical soundtrack, but I really do. And so that's just fair, and I'm going to listen to it all the time.
Well, but the Beatles are such a wide range within that one band, or like to album to album.
For
so
sure.
It's almost kind of weird to not have a wider musical taste if you celebrate the whole Beatles catalog, which it seems like you said you kind of listen to the whole thing through, you know, you celebrate the whole catalog. So that's interesting, but maybe it's that connection of his youth to that era of time that you could never upset one way or the other. Is there any group, like artist or band that maybe you had to revisit that you did put off? You're like, no, I'm not listening to them. Like I keep saying 50 Cent, like I've never actually put on one of his albums, you know, like anybody that you slept on that you revisited later, you think?
I think that's a good question. I think I do that a lot. I think that I'm somewhat behind the curve, especially these days, a lot with this stuff. I honestly rarely listen to music these days, which is, you can kick me off the podcast now if you want to. But I think I'm behind the curve on a lot of things nowadays. I feel like my partner Lorelai keeps me up to date with a lot of this stuff. Would I listen to as much Taylor Swift without her? Probably not. Do I love Taylor Swift? Yes. Am I kept up to date on everything album-wise, personal life-wise, politically, Taylor Swift? Yes. And that's a huge benefit. So I'm very grateful for that. Stuff like that, I would not be as plugged into. Or like you send me stuff on bands or interviews with band members and stuff like that. And so there's definitely stuff that I would not be as connected to. And I think that like even now in 2024, in the age of the internet, 2024, stuff is just there. If I'm like make a radio station, I'm hearing Chapel Roan, which I also did not know anything about until this latest like couple of hits, and is also like super quirky and super weird.
This Hot to Go song? Dude,
Yes.
it's in like a Target commercial or something. We hear that every day.
There's another single in there that keeps getting stuck in my head.
Good Luck Babe, Pink Pony Club, Red
Pink
Wine
Pony
Supernova.
Club.
Pink Pony Club. I don't know this one.
Baby girl, I know she's gonna scream. God, what have you done? You're a pink pony girl, and you dance at the club. Oh, mama, I'm just
That's super catchy. I love it.
I just really love the fluctuations in her voice as she's singing, just the range of sound. Like you were saying, it's like very musical and then builds, and then it turns into this like funk 80s pink pop soundtracky song. And I just really, really love all of it. I didn't put two and two together, but when I listened to that song, Phantom of the Opera also gets stuck in my head. So there must be like some kind of thing that I'm matching in between those two things. It's so easy to be kept in the loop with all of this stuff. Maybe like extending into the rest of the catalog and not just the singles is a little bit more difficult in the way we listen to music now. But
if you like one song, go listen to the other songs. Yeah,
for sure.
Especially if you like the voice. You know, like music is one thing, but if you like the singer, you like Adele, her voice is fantastic. Every song she sings sounds fantastic. Maybe you don't like the story or the arrangement or whatever, but she always sounds good, you know? So if you clue into something you like, the thing that's funny with a lot of, I don't know what you call this genre. We're talking about the Beatles being like lots of different things. Pop music now is like 100 genres in one. It's like singer-songwriter. It's like indie rock. It's 80s. It's got so much blended into one package, which is really cool and kind of makes it hard to like pin down things, but you can hear a lot of influences. I don't know if this is what you're hearing with the fluctuations in the voice, but that reminds me of like the Cranberries.
Oh, yeah.
Not that those are like
Very
one-to-one, but the kind of like yodeling, you know, inflections there are sort of similar. The musical arrangement, not really at all, but maybe the kind of expansive nature of it sort of fits in with it, but not the synthesizers and the 80s drums and whatnot.
So I don't know if there's something from the past that I've picked up on later that I've really enjoyed. I mean, maybe it's fair to say that you turned me on to a lot more music than I would have ever listened to. Because I went into college being that person, being like, I like everything except this, this, and this, right? And even the first day we met, you were like, that's dumb. And so I think that because of you, you know, you gave me credit at the beginning of the episode, but I think because of you, I developed the capacity to appreciate a lot wider range of music than I had been. So it opened me up to a lot more possibilities and stuff. And really, my iPod at that moment in time was all music from you. Like it was Yellowcard and it was Goldfinger and other bands from that era, and a couple of really weird ones with really weird nasally voices that I can't remember the name of at the moment. That was probably the biggest switch for me.
It's funny you mentioned that because I didn't realize that you adopted so much of the like, you know, punk stuff that I was in. I remember you enjoying this one. Don't Say Goodbye.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I love that song. Still love it. Dude, it's like an anime opening right now. It's like
that
a
is,
cartoon.
yeah, it's like
that's
Power
another
Rangers
thing. That's another like, yeah. So that's another thing that really like gets me. Like, I don't know how far we want to dive down here, but like 90s X-Men intro, like that's hugely influential. And so if I can like, if something is going to, this is what I mean when what I said earlier, like I need it to amp me up. If it's going to make me feel like I'm Goku or Vegeta, that's what I need my music to do. For the most part. I mean, Pink Pony Club might not do that, but I suppose it might depend on the situation.
Yeah, Goldfinger is like my favorite band, so it's cool to me that you're into them. And also, that's off the album Stomping Ground. That's the one with their 99 Red Balloons cover that maybe people might be familiar with. And I feel like that's a little bit more of an obscure Goldfinger album and like punk album in general, but that's one of my favorites. Their singer, John Feldman, is an excellent singer-songwriter, excellent producer. You want to talk about energy? That dude has energy, and he infuses all of his music with it.
Yeah, but I was going to ask you, like you mentioned 50 Cent, and you like haven't really gotten into 50 Cent, but are there others for you? If you like understanding that you appreciated music a lot more in a lot wider, you know, range of appreciation than I did back then, but still your tastes have like grown and continued to grow since then. And I think even since starting to do our podcast Krypton to Alderaan, the ways in which we appreciate stuff has changed. So maybe we're a little bit more like open to other stuff in general. So do you have anything that you like reflect back on that you're like, oh, this is, yeah, I get it.
Well, I put you on the spot. You're putting me on the spot. It's hard to think of something like exactly, but maybe less so of like modern popular music. But what I find myself doing a lot is like revisiting like a legacy act or albums from a band that I skipped over and didn't get into or whatnot. So like one really big one, I think it was one of my top 5 Spotify listens last year, was Huey Lewis in the News.
Oh, wow.
Like, I only knew, what's the one that's in Back to the Future? Don't take money. Power of Love.
And Hip to Be Square.
Hip to Be Square. Yeah, so I knew those singles, right? The big singles. But their first album was just a random day where I said, I'm going to go back through and like listen to some of that group. And their first album is like a punk album. Like it's late 70s, early 80s, so it's of that era. But it has the same through line of like the music that I'm into in the 2000s era, right? 20 years later, but it's obviously where that music came from to some degree.
You better listen when I say don't make me do it. Don't make me do it to you. Don't make me do it. Don't make me do it to you.
And I remember listening to that and be like, dude, this is Huey Lewis and the News. It's like punk rock. It's not The Power of Love. It turns into that after like 2 or 3 albums. They get a little bit more like polished. Isn't that the scene in American Psycho when he's like, they came into their own on this album? But yeah, like going back in and listening to like legacy artists, I would have never done that. And maybe it would have been harder to do in high school. Like you would have had to physically go to a store and buy, like seek out the album and buy it, or, get it off of Napster or something. It's way easier now to just pull it up on Spotify. So in that sense, it's like you're able to expose yourself to more if you want to. So that's one deep dive that I've done. And I now have a playlist of like my favorite Huey Lewis and the News songs, which would have never...
That's super cool.
My parents didn't listen to them. That was not their generation, right? So I love that. They're one of my newfound favorites in the last year. And I try to keep a list of a Spotify playlist called To Listen To, of like bands I've never listened to, but like you have to hear this before you die. And it's mostly like legacy acts. At the top of it, I've got like Iron Maiden, because people tell me it's just like you're saying with Coheed and Cambria, like they're writing about this other like universe, So I have them on this playlist. I've listened to a little bit of them. I love that, like the riffage that they have going. Van Halen is on there. Like names that when somebody says, oh, you're a musician, you teach music, oh, you must know every single musician and artist and song ever. And it's like, no, that's not. People always assume that of me. They're like, don't you know this album? I don't know any Van Halen, but like they're on my to listen to list of like, you have to appreciate this. Yeah, I wish I could think of other like popular like punk bands or other pop acts that I would maybe like shunned on, because that would be the real cherry on top, to know like what you actively avoided that you came back to. Maybe to speak to that more specifically, it's like, I hate using the term guilty pleasure, but newer artists like Sabrina Carpenter or Olivia Rodrigo, I'm like, it's the kids show. Is the Clone Wars a kids show? I'm like, that music I don't think is made for me, but every time I hear it, I'm like, this is freaking awesome. But maybe this is like your dad's take on new music versus the Beatles. It's like, I don't think Olivia Rodrigo is necessarily supposed to be my music, but it can be if I let it be, right? You have to get over your own ego and just be like, yeah, I love the music. I don't care who it's supposed to be for Taylor Swift or whatever. Like, I'm a Swiftie, I'm an emo kid, whatever you are. That label like hurts the ability to actually enjoy the thing, Are you a real Star Wars fan? Like,
right, exactly.
That's the same thing. So I probably find myself sleeping on newer music and have to like force myself to get into it. But like Halsey a few years ago was one of those for me where I was like, I know this isn't like really up my alley, but I love it. And it's produced so well and it has elements that I like. I kind of find myself having to like, I'm not up on a soapbox of like, I know how to appreciate music more than anybody else, but I know that I need to try to, otherwise you're missing out.
Yeah.
And especially if you're thinking about a younger generation of human beings, whether that's your children or just other people out there, like you're going to be disconnected from them if you don't consume the things that they're listening to. Even if you don't love it, it doesn't have to be your favorite thing, but to kind of understand it, certainly not to be like, music was better in my day. I think Pink Cotton Candy song or whatever that was. What was that called?
Pink Pony Club.
Pink Pony Club. Like, that's cool. I wouldn't have seeked that out on my own, but I would return to that, like that was cool, especially with that like Cranberries reference when you can tie it into something else.
I think it'll be interesting to see what we do with the next generation, because it's hard to think that we'll be as closed off as I think previous generations has been with the next generation of music, right? I think that goes back generations. again, like rock and roll was bad to our parents. Maybe our stuff is bad to our parents. But we, from what I understand of the history of music, the diversity of music right now is much, at least our access to a very diverse range of music it's much more accessible than it's ever been. So we don't have, I'm speaking too generally, but I don't have that one thing. Like, yes, Matt and Kim is like my band. That's my jam. That's my like that ride or die. But I'm like open to all the other things and listening to other things and appreciating other things. So it feels like we won't have that same sort of reaction to the next generation's tastes, because what we're listening to right now is so dynamic and we have access to so many different things that maybe it'll be weirder later, but it's going to be like, oh yeah, that's like that sounds like the Cranberries or whatever, you know? We're going to be able to thoughtfully make those connections, I think.
Yeah, having the like historical knowledge like allows you, this is the Rebels and Clone Wars, you know, of music. Like, you know where it came from, so you can see the connections there and almost appreciate it in a different way. Because sometimes you hear something for the first time and you're like, this is blowing my mind. I never knew this was like possible. You know, we're talking about like finding one random song or one random artist and you're like, I kind of like that. It's like, yeah, we have to like go and listen to the whole album and get into it, you know? Like, your dad's into the Beatles. You were into Cake. Like, you had the album and you celebrated that whole thing. I think that's a lot harder nowadays. Like, even me, I put out one song at a time, you know? So maybe like you find that one song, you don't find a whole album. It's like, we're obviously in a different age and era with how the medium is consumed, like through Spotify or YouTube or wherever you're listening to. Like, you don't have to have the album. You can just have the one favorite song, which is cool that you can be like so diverse, pick and choose all these individual points. But there is a little bit less of like, I bought the album and it's the only thing in my CD tray. If there's one thing I think older generations would be justified to get up on the soapbox, it's like, I had it and I wore out the tape. I had the CD so long, you can see all the scratches from me throwing it in and out of my bookcase or whatever.
Yeah. See, this is stuff that I don't really think about. Again, I'm not like seeking out music these days. So it's hard. I just go on YouTube Music and listen to something I've already listened to 100 times, or make a radio station about that and then just listen to one-offs, right? I'm not going on to listen to albums. Maybe that's an important like part of the sort of revitalization of vinyl that's happened within the past like 10 or 15 or 20 years, because you put it on and then you have to listen to the whole thing. Like, you're not going to put it on for the single and then take it off and put the next record on. So, but yeah, with streaming music, like, I'm scrolling through a Gorlliaz album right now that I love a few of the songs on, but there are so many songs that I don't know because I've just never sat down and listened to this whole album.
And how crazy is that? Because you're like, I love this artist, but I don't even know their work.
Yeah. And it's crazy to look at the different, like, I can see the plays. So like the first song, which is my favorite because it's, you know, I've heard it, 141 million plays. Next one, 116, 25, 8.8. You know, it's dropping as we're going down on the track number.
When you look at the albums, that is so interesting to see the plays versus that. Dude, let's go to on Stomping Ground. You know, you've got 120 million plays for 99 Red Balloons, but that song Don't Say Goodbye, less than 500,000. So it's a percent of a percent of people that have heard that, at least on streaming.
And 99 Red Balloons, like that was in one of those teen movies.
It might have been,
back in the
Euro
day,
Trip
I
or
think.
something.
So that's something like that. So we had a different level of access or nostalgia connection to that. But man, Don't Say Goodbye is just a better song.
Well, they're all great songs, but you don't necessarily get to, when you're picking and choosing, or you're listening to like Daily Mix 1 or a playlist or radio station, then you don't get the whole catalog, which is like, you know, we get a lot more singles now. My favorite band, Less Than Jake, they have an album that's coming out soon, but they're doing the traditional method of like, we drop one single this week, in a couple of weeks we drop another, and it like builds out into a little EP, and then it finally gets into a full album. And like, I just want the whole album. The like single drip drop is like, I'm on like both sides of this. It's kind of frustrating to have one single at a time, but it is great to kind of just cherry pick, have the playlists. I do love like the complete nature of like, I need to know the whole album, even if you're going to end up winding up just having a couple of favorite songs off of it, to have given it kind of a fair shake, you know? That might have been the case that you heard the lead single from the Gorlliaz you bought the CD and you're like, actually, I only like the single. The other songs are not quite as a hit as that one. But you can go through and find that out for yourself. That like discovery part of it is so huge. Sometimes I have to force myself to do that though. Like this Pink Fluffy Unicorns. What was it? I'm butchering it.
This is a funny bit. This is a real good bit. Pink Pony Club.
Pink Pony Club. If I like that song, I'm going to have to force myself again, like to go back into it. Like you have to really want to be into it. I don't want music to just like be only singles. So I wish that I could write a whole album and put it out. It's a lot of work when you're just one person, but bands still exist, you know? I miss that experience of like buying the album and being forced kind of to listen to that and that being all you had rather than being able to pull up some things. Not that music, the way we consumed it is better in the olden days, but it's just different. And you have to curtail the way you engage with it. Like I literally have a reminder on my phone. You said earlier, like I listen to more podcasts than music. And the same thing. Like I have a reminder every Friday at 9 a.m. to open up my release radar to make sure I have a reminder to listen to music. And obviously I love music, but like you sometimes need the kick to be like, take some time to actually find some new stuff. And then when you find something cool, you know, follow the artist, find some more songs from them, maybe listen to the whole album.
Yep. I do not do that. I never do that at all. I like throw on a podcast or throw on like an episode of a YouTube content creator that I need to be caught up on and never, I need to set a reminder. Be like, hey, remember to listen to music. I can't remember the last time I sat down or even like drove somewhere and listened to an album that wasn't, I guess, Taylor Swift. If we go on a long road trip, we put on Taylor Swift. But yeah, just like go through these albums. I should make a list of like stuff that I want to listen to. Like I would love to, I should listen to this whole Gorlliaz album. I really love a couple of the songs on it. And I really appreciate the lore associated with it. So something that I also need to do.
The reminder is silly because it's like you need a reminder to listen to new music, but also music comes out on Fridays. So like that's also part of the equation. Like when it was New Music Tuesday, back in the day, we would go to, you'd know what was being released and you'd go to FYE or whatever, Best Buy, and you'd pick up the album because it came out on that day. So I think it makes sense to have a reminder for it. It almost sounds like, you know, in the same sense we would make like a burned CD or mixtape or whatever. Like, yeah, make yourself a playlist, you know, of like, I'm going on this trip. These are the songs we're going to listen to. You know, I'm working out today. These are the songs I want to work out to, or I'm brainstorming, whatever it is. Like, that's almost, I wouldn't say it's a lost art, but like, yeah, you have to take the time to like say, we're going to be listening to music at this event, whatever it is. And I'm going to curate the sounds for that.
I will say that if I'm going to sound like a huge hypocrite here, but when I do go to the gym and exercise, I need to listen to an inspiring talk or an audiobook. I do not listen to music at the gym, which I might be maybe the only person in the world to do it that way. But last road trip we took with some friends, Lorelai introduced us to this game. I invite everyone listening to try next time you're with a group of people on the road. You make a Spotify playlist. Each person like anonymously adds to the playlist. And then as you shuffle the playlist, as the songs come up, you have to guess who in the car put that song on the playlist.
That's really fun.
Yeah, it was super fun. It's fun then trying to like throw curveballs and trying to get people to guess other people.
So you intentionally pick like weird, like I think everyone would know what I was picking. It'd be, you know, you would know my taste. I think if you're close enough friends, that should be obvious. How do you trick somebody?
Once you listen to a couple songs and you still are like adding stuff, you're like, oh, this one sounds like this. I know this song sounds like a Royce pick, so I'm going to put it in there. And then they'll be like, Royce. And I'll be like, no, it was me. And then it's a trick. My friends that I've made more recently are very confused by my musical taste. I was with a group yesterday playing Magic the Gathering, and I put on some music and I put on Flogging Molly because when I was in high school and we would play Magic the Gathering, we would listen to Flogging Molly. So there's an association there. And the people I was with last night were like, I'm very surprised that this is Joey's music. Because it isn't bubblegum pop, right? Like it's Flogging Molly.
Yeah.
And Dropkick Murphys and all that stuff.
But like I said, that's the Bigwig song that we played earlier. Like it has that punk aesthetic to it. You don't seem like you identify like that as the like you're not going to spike your hair and, put patches all over your jacket or whatever, but like you still appreciate the music for what it is. Robin and I saw Flogging Molly a year or two ago, and I've never had more beer spilled on me at a concert than that one.
That's so funny. That sounds like a fun time. Yeah, I bet there would be really fun to see. I don't really want to be involved in like the violent side of a concert. I was never like a mosh pit. I'm going to stand here or preferably sit here and listen to the music if that's okay with everybody else, please.
How do you feel about live music versus just listening to an album? Like being at a show, enjoying music, even if it's just like not even a band you went to see on tour, just like live music at a fair or something. Like, do you feel there's a difference in like listening to music that's being performed live by musicians rather than just like on the CD in your headphones, on the stereo?
I think the thing about listening to music in person, whether it's at like a touring gig or just like a local thing, is the energy, feeding off of the energy and vibe of the band and the crowd and the fans and everything. I mean, it's the same with me for everything. It's the same with me for like going to a party or going to the movies or going to do anything where there's going to be a crowd. The best part is always like existing in that energy and feeling good based on that energy and vibe of the crowd. And I think like that's the biggest upside of live music to me. The downside is it's always like obviously less refined and produced than it is on the like physical product that they make. But with the exception of, we were just at a show that was put on by the university here, and the artist's name is Sierra Hull, and she's like a mandolin player, and she's won a bunch of like mandolin awards. She was incredible. She had a band with her and it was very bluegrassy, which I enjoy, but wouldn't be like my normal thing to go to. But we went and she was just amazing. And I was like, shouldn't that mandolin be catching on fire? Like she's just so
Shredding.
fast. It's incredible to watch them, how fast they are. And then I like listened to her, like I pull her up on YouTube Music and listen to her. And I'm like, oh, I really enjoyed her so much more in person live. And I don't know if that's because of the music or if it's because of like the vibe and the crowd work and the rest of the crowd. And there's so many people were excited to see her and it was a whole big thing. But yeah, I like listen to her now like a week later online and I'm like, oh man, I wish there was a live album. I wish there was like a live recorded album.
Yeah, man, there's so much there. Like when you see the band live and then you hear the recording and you're like, oh, it's not as good as the show. But it's funny because you mentioned like sometimes the show isn't as refined as the recording, obviously. So it's almost like this is the number one thing about the subjectivity of it. The first experience imprints so much more than like the second one does. Like then you're judging it based on the other thing, or you heard one version of the song recorded, but the band re-recorded it, whether it's the earlier or the later version. So you like one over the other, or even the live version versus like having seen it live versus on CD. It's so fascinating when you're like, but it's the same song. It's the same singer, obviously a different production, but like hits sort of differently when you're not on the same wavelength with everyone in the crowd, jumping up and down, sweating, or maybe it's just because it's 120 dB or whatever it is, just like being overwhelmed with it in the live show. Man, I used to really love live shows because of that energy, like get me in the mosh pit, worry about your glasses if they're going to make it out alive, jump up and down, scream along with every word, lose your voice the next day. The older I get, the less I want to do that. And
yeah,
the more I'm like, I just want to like enjoy the band and like literally like people don't even clap like when songs are over anymore. It's like when the song ends, like I want to applaud that performance of like that you're giving your all there. You're literally singing for your supper. And I just want to like watch and appreciate the performance rather than like rock out with them, even though I'll nod. My neck is always sore from nodding along, but I don't mosh along too much anymore. But I'm too short to go to shows, like packed shows. I only want to go shows that are like half capacity. If it's sold out, there's always someone in front of me and I can never see. I'm always doing this, all day. Never really get like a full look at the stage. That more than anything kind of makes a show sort of a bummer, because then you're like, I just need to sit here and like listen and literally just listen for the music rather than like the visual of the band on stage or anything else, which I've literally found myself doing more and more lately. We just saw something corporate a few weeks ago. Tall dude in front of me. And I literally was like, I'm just going to close my eyes and just listen to the song and just like enjoy the music rather than try to see the cool stage setup because I cannot see it. So why like struggle the whole time? And like, it's really hard for me to like not think about those other factors at the show. The sound aside, which can be such a huge one, you know, like if you actually enjoy the mix, which we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today in the podcast, but it's really good. Like, does it even sound good? Because some people might just want to be in the mosh pit, in the vibe, not really care how it sounds, but nothing's worse than if you can't like hear the vocals or like the mix is weird or it is just too loud that you're like, it doesn't need to be this loud. You're blowing me over, you know?
Yeah, we have one venue in town here that there's a lot of like local live music, but it's at a bar. It's a super small room. It's like very overwhelming because a lot of people show up to support them, but it's like not a big place. And so it's super loud and you can't have a conversation. And, you know, all the old man yells at cloud stuff that goes along with all of that. But it's also like not the most convenient way to absorb the content that's being displayed musically.
Right. Well, having been on the other side, like if you're the guitarist on stage, you want to crank your guitar. Like that's part of your experience as the performer too. You want to feel big and powerful and confident. I can remember so many times having played shows though and finishing and someone in the audience saying like, we couldn't hear the singer because the guitars were like really loud. And you're like, oh, it felt good on stage, but like we ruined the experience for everyone, you know? So like there is a give and a take there. You're saying like folk music though, that was almost always going to translate when you're like, it's less electrified. Like there's no competition because it's just singers with their acoustic guitars or acoustic instruments. I'd much rather see a folk artist because then you're going to get the most pure experience rather than the rock band where you're like, you could mix like the drums and bass too loud and I don't even hear. Now we're back to 50 Cent territory. It's just drums and bass and you don't hear the background music or the oohs and ahs or the subtleties as well, you know? It's a different experience though. Like for me, my favorite way to listen is like literally on these headphones right here where you can get all the detail there. I love speakers in a room, especially that you can like walk around and just like it's all around you. But I really love like I said, the closing your eyes and like everything is right there. And you can pinpoint elements. You can zone in on like one thing or another. It's the superior way to get the detail out of it. But then you're not sharing that experience, you know, with anybody around you, you know? You're at the silent disco sort of thing.
No, that's super interesting because I never thought about it that like technically I've always just been, I guess, mindfully, right? Like I listen to the music, I'm like, oh, I like that or whatever that noise is or the weird sound maker that Cake uses or whatever.
The vibra slap.
What's that weird or vibra slap or theremin or whatever's going on. But mostly for me, it's always been about like, I guess that's it. It's always been about the vibe more than anything else, right? Like, this is weird. This is energetic. This is fun. This is like the crowd at this thing. So it's always been about maybe more about like what vibe, what mood, what energy does it fill me with? And that's what I've more associated with it. And certainly I don't have as good of an ear for like pinpointing this like details of it as you do, someone who like does this for a living. I'm trying to more so now because I'm taking piano lessons, but I'm getting there. But there's a lot. How do you get past just hearing a wall of sound? For me is difficult. So like maybe listening more on headphones and being mindful of the parts that make it all up is just not something I'm doing. I'm just like, yeah, for sure. Flogging Molly. Yeah, right on. Cake, stick shifts and safety belts. Right on, man. Like, yeah, I'm geared up. I'm ready to go. And that's really where I've paid the most attention.
Well, I mean, if you think of any party, it's like we just need the music on and loud, and it's got to be, you know, got to fit the vibe, whatever it is, you know. Not to say it doesn't matter, you know, the intricacies of it or the lyrics or whatever, but you just need to fill the ambiance properly for that particular event. So, and that's why, like, it matters, like, what the genre is, because if you're at a sporting event, if you're at a bar, if you're playing Magic the Gathering, those are all different ambiances you want to create with different styles of music, you know, or even different like volume levels of the music. But so you don't normally listen on headphones or earbuds or anything?
Sometimes with earbuds on the rare occasion that I'm at the gym and I'm listening to music, I have earbuds in. But mostly, I guess if I'm listening to music, it's either through the computer speakers or the car speakers. I never sit here and listen to it with headphones on, unless I'm listening to the new, whatever the new Royish Good Looks song is. And then I put the speakers on, I watch the video, I completely immerse myself in the world and the music and the lyrics and all of it. So those are the few times that I put headphones on.
I appreciate the pomp and circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, I put headphones on when I'm listening to the episode of Krypton to Alderaan we just put out as well. So those are very important things to me.
Yeah. So I'm really curious about this, though, because like you said a couple things there I won't be able to, I'm going to listen back and wish I could quote it directly, but like you put on the song and like the song is there and you're enjoying it as like a whole. I'm super biased, but like I would love to know, like when you are listening, though, what do you follow along with? What do you even pay attention to? Or do you not even notice anything? It's just the song.
I think top of the list is the lyrics and the vocals. But I think whatever stands out, like this mandolin player, she was with a band and the mandolin would stand out and then the violin would come in and kind of be the main piece, I think. I don't really know the language for it. But whatever is that main piece or weird thing going on is what I like tune into. I'm never really like, oh, that bass lick was fire or whatever. But I'm big into lyrics and like, wow, that's a really cool lyric. That's like, what does that mean? Remember when they said this kind of thing? I tell you what, if there's a kazoo in a song, then I'm like clocked in for sure. But it changes. I don't know. There's nothing ever specific. Probably the drums are the most like kind of drowned out thing for me in any. I'm just not able to tell unless it's some like 70s drum solo crazy thing. I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. Just in like an everyday song or whatever.
What if I said do 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 do? Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, obviously that's like a very well-known thing, but I don't know what else like a modern version of that would be.
Yeah, but no drums, but lead instruments. That's so interesting. Like, I guess I can focus in on one instrument, but I'm also like, I want to hear every instrument. I want to hear every piece. Like every person in the band is ideally contributing to the sound overall. And I guess if it's a good balance of all those instruments, good arrangement, then some can just melt away in the background because they're not distracting from the most important thing. Yeah, the little bass lick or whatever. Like in Party in the USA, Miley Cyrus, Party in the USA. There's this stupid little synthesizer every other 4 bars, and it goes, and then it goes up an octave the next time, and it goes back and forth. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like this one little element that's in there. And when I hear that song, I'm always listening for that part. That's like just as much of a hook to me in it, but it's not necessarily like, I guess it's kind of a lead element, but it's one of those things that I'm like, that was put in there. It's really important. If you took that part out, it's missing something in between that vocal line.
Well, I'm sure if we record a follow-up episode to this or a part 2 to this, I will be paying, I mean, this is the way it goes. I will be paying attention for those things in the music now. I think the thing that I can tie that to, it's not exactly the same, but I've been big into a new show called Has Been Hotel. It's an animated show and it's a musical and I really love the soundtrack. But there's one character in there who has like an old-timey radio voice. His name is Alistair. They call him the radio demon. And so when he sings, it's like that old-timey radio sound.
That's cool.
And so obviously it's still like the vocals, but it's very specific. And when it's like an ensemble song, I can just zone in on him in the ensemble.
She's bound to pass the test as princess of hell. Like her daddy, she
It's such a cool sound. The voice actor is also just incredible. It's just so good. I think that's maybe the way I can relate to this most right now is that even in a complex, crowded song, I zone in on that sound because it is so appealing to me. Yeah, Has Been Hotel. Check it out. Soundtrack's great. Show's great. Alistair's great. It's all great.
Yeah, this also reminds me of like when we're watching, a movie or a series, like there's a score in the background and sometimes it goes unnoticed. But how many times were we like, I listened to that or I watched the show again and I paid attention to the arrangement in the background and it's like, whoa. It then recontextualizes that scene when you can hear what the music is doing, or the strings, piano, whatever it is, influencing that emotion that on the first time through, you don't pay attention because you're listening for the lead melody, the dialogue in the show. But then when you go back through, you're like, yeah, listen to that Kevin Kiner, like pulling at your heartstrings.
Oh, I was going to say, that's the biggest one for me right now. I mean, we're talking about Rebels and we talked about the Clone Wars and Clone Wars Season 7. The soundtrack to the 7th season of the Clone Wars is a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece. And sometimes I just put on songs from that in my day-to-day life. I'll just put songs from the soundtrack to the 7th season of this show on because it's so good. And I think a lot of like my connection to what you're talking about like started with John Williams in Jurassic Park and all the other things that we watched growing up. Maybe even peaked with Lost in the early 2000s. Michael Giacchino with that soundtrack. There's no better song to walk to than Hollywood and Vines. Like that's just like that elevates them walking through the jungle. The fact that this all works together to create a greater good, I think is like the most important. I don't want to get too into Star Wars here, but it's always with Star Wars. I mean, if you go watch the Obi-Wan series, the music, I really like that show. Not a lot of people do, but I think the music also really helps in a lot of those scenes with the emotion and the stakes and all of it. That kind of stuff is what I'm listening to more these days. The soundtrack and the theme song. I also just like put on the Gravity Falls theme song pretty frequently and like different versions and a cappella versions and 8-bit versions. And I just listen to different versions of all of these things as well. There's just like the background subtle music that if you pay attention to makes or breaks like the scene of a movie or TV show. It's just incredible. The like theory that goes into that and the way that it works on us as the audience.
I mean, this ties back into the beginning of the conversation today. Like it's that universe building. The arrangement helps build the universe because it tells you something about the scene, the stakes that are there, the emotions from the characters. Like it is another character within the show. It helps build that world. So important. There's the famous story of like screening Star Wars without the music and it doesn't work. The story's already there. It's already written. The dialogue's already there. The scenes are already shot. The special effects are already there, whatever it is. But then you add the music and that ties it all together. It's like the opposite of what we're talking about of like, oh, I like the music first. Who cares about the lyrics? Oh, I listened to the lyrics and now there's a beautiful story there. It's like the other way around. You still had a hero's journey, but they needed to be supplemented with that. You know, it's almost like the live show. Like you need something else to physically be resonating around you while you're being told the story. Man, that's so perfect. And how much of that is like, you know, again, like under the radar that like you don't always consciously recognize that, you know, like you're saying you're not even listening to the drums, but like I'm sure when you mute the drums in Going the Distance with Cake, or if you were to mute the drums in Daylight by Matt and Kim, that makes the whole groove there.
Yeah.
So maybe you're not listening for it, but it's still obviously integral. Everyone is playing an important role.
It would be interesting to have this conversation with Pro Tools open for you. It would be interesting to have this conversation and have you like turning things on and off to like indicate how the music changes based on that. But yeah, each instrument is a character and then they all come together to go on this journey together to make this music. And then it's like facilitating this other journey on Lost to like walk through the mountains or whatever. It's incredible how well it all just like meshes together. And the way I described it is like forming the greater good. I guess, unfortunately, most of us are not mindful of all the time. But if you like pay attention to the music going on in the background of a great scene of television or a movie, it's like specifically there to make the scene great. And if you turned it off, it would just be like, well, Jack Bauer is on the floor again or whatever. I'm just throwing out all our classic Krypton to Alderaan connections.
But sometimes, Joey, sometimes they end the episode on the silent clock.
And sometimes they end Lost on the silent Lost. Or like at the end of Gravity Falls, the last like few episodes of Gravity Falls, they like invert the theme song. The weird Mageddon storyline, they like switch up the theme song, which is, I also think, so genius. I mean, it just lets you know what's going on.
The opposite of whatever you heard being just as powerful, or the absence of music being just as powerful. I love that. Man, we're going to have to do a part 2 of this because this is a lot of fun. Obviously, we can go down a lot of rabbit holes, but like, kind of do want to go down some rabbit holes. For those of you listening, watching, we would love to hear your experiences with music. What are your favorite bands? What are your parents' favorite bands? How does all that intertwine together? Do they like what you listen to? Do you like what they listen to? Hey, if you got kids, I think that really throws an extra wrench into this into the discussion. So we would love to talk with you down in the comments below. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Do you want to do some more of these, Joey, maybe? If we get a good reaction from the crowd, we can record again.
I would love to do more of these. I think there's lots of little like segues and rabbit holes that we could have checked that I think each of us are thinking about, like, oh, if we had gone there, the conversation, you know, could go in so many different ways. And there's follow-up to be done here on like listening to these other parts that you were talking about and so many other things and so many other bands that I want to talk about and get your thoughts on and just geek over. We need to do at least a part 2, regardless of how it's received. How about that?
I'd love to go more technical or nerdy if we want to revisit this. Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty details. That could be a lot of fun. All right, everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again on another podcast soon.
Key-pee.
Cool.
Cool.